I'd now like to introduce Jody Bricu, one of Australia's leading circular economy experts with supply chain and circular economy experience across Australia, Europe and Dubai. Jody is a circular economy advisor to many state-funded bodies, and we're very proud to have her on our board at New South Wales Circular. So Jody will host a series of discussions now, starting with key research by New South Wales Circular's task forces, funded by the Office of Chief Scientist and Engineer on measuring carbon in the circular economy. We'll also hear from the Product Stewardship Centre of Excellence and about regulation for regional circular waste solutions. The second discussion will be the Australian states and territories. So over to you, Jody.
For that lovely intro, Lisa, and what a morning we've had already at this amazing event. Well done everyone that's put this together, and well done everyone that's listening online today. It's really important to bring people across Australia together on these topics. I'd just like to mention or acknowledge that I'm joining you from Kaurna country in Adelaide, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging here. I've got the immense pleasure of hosting a wonderful panel today on the state of circular, and the organisers have brought in such an amazing array of different people from different parts of the economy, which is something I really love to see. This is not about one part of the economy. We need governments, businesses at different levels to be coming together to unravel some of this complex issues around circular economy. So I'll give a quick introduction to everyone now, and then we'll get into the presentations. But Emily Yip is joining us from New South Wales Government, Rusty Langdon from the Institute of Sustainable Futures at UTS, John Gertsakis from the Product Stewardship Centre of Excellence, a national centre, and Justin Bonsey is here from the Southern Sydney Regional Organisation of Councils. We're going to start with Emily Yip from DPI in New South Wales Government. Emily is an experienced senior manager and strong operations professional with a PhD. So she's one step ahead of me, who's struggling with my PhD in this space. And Emily's going to be talking to us about the amazing government work that they've been doing on making circular economy happen. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Jody, for the introduction. I'll first try to share my screen and hopefully it works. I think the screen is shared. Is it working properly? Yeah, great.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks, Jody. As Jody introduced, I'm the Director for the Circular Economy Policy and Markets branch within the Department of Planning and Environment in New South Wales. I'm speaking to you today from the Darug land in New South Wales, and I pay respects to the elders past and present. Our branch sits within the Climate Change and Sustainability divisions in the department, and our divisions delivers policies, programs and partnerships to reduce carbon emissions, drive innovation and sustainability, and also helping New South Wales to adapt to a changing climate. And a part of doing that, we are also trying to support our transition to a circular economy. The circular economy, as you know, a lot of the speakers before me have sort of spoken about, is about changing the way that we produce, assemble, sell, and use products and materials so that we can minimize waste and to reduce our environmental impact. New South Wales is committed to making the transition to a circular economy over the next 20 years. And the importance of circular economy to New South Wales' future is recognized in our New South Wales 2040 Economic Blueprint. The blueprint identifies circular economy as a critical pathway to deliver sustainability objectives and also to harness strong employment growth. Circular economy is also a crucial piece of the puzzle for us to achieve New South Wales net zero ambition by addressing emissions deeply embedded in the materials and the products flowing within our economy. Moving to a circular economy will provide long-term economic, social, and environmental benefits for New South Wales. This transition will also increase the robustness of our economy and also the resilience of our climate change, maximizing the value of our resources and reducing waste. Our circular economy policy approach in New South Wales reflects the challenges that we face today. Over the next 20 years, New South Wales waste volumes are forecast to grow from 21 million tonnes to nearly 37 million tonnes, and our recycling rates have stagnated. Without sustained action over the next 20 years, we'll have more waste than we can safely manage. Since 2018, demand for recycled materials has steadily decreased with the closure of the export market. This has also resulted in an oversupply of recycled material and a decline in their value, which then leads to the increase of recycling costs for our households and businesses. We have also seen the impact of plastics waste and how hundreds of millions of plastics items are littered each year, polluting our environment and harming our wildlife. We also have a growing understanding of how the life cycle of products and materials affect climate change. While emissions from organic waste decomposing in landfill only makes up 2% of the emissions in New South Wales, we know that the big ticket item is the estimated 45% global emissions that are attributed to the way we use and manage material and products. These emerging challenges have informed our new strategic directions, including the New South Wales Waste and Sustainable Materials Strategy 2041, which we released in June last year. The strategy outlines actions we'll take over the next 6 years to reduce waste and also change how we produce, consume, and recycle materials. These actions are backed by $356 million in funding over 5 years, starting from July this year. In the strategy, New South Wales has adopted the National Waste Policy targets, but also set ambitious additional targets. The first 5 targets on this list are the National Waste Policy targets that we have adopted. In addition to the national targets, the New South Wales government is also introducing a plastics litter reduction targets of 30% by 2025 and a new overall litter reduction targets of 60% by 2030. We also want to triple our plastics recycling rate by 2030. So it's great to actually be seeing the launch of the CSIRO Ending Plastics mission on Sunday as well. And through the strategy, we have also reconfirmed our commitment under the New South Wales Net Zero Plan to achieve net zero emissions from organic waste by 2030. To deliver on these targets, our strategy has 3 focus areas of direct action. The first focus area is to meet our future infrastructure and service needs. As the waste volumes continue to grow, we need infrastructures and services to keep pace. We'll work to ensure we have the capacity to meet our critical future needs, as well as implementing funding programs and other initiatives to help to stimulate investments in a pipeline of infrastructure and innovation. The second focus area is around reducing our carbon emissions through better waste and material management. We'll work to make our materials more productive and reduce our reliance on emission-intensive virgin material. Lastly, we'll also continue to build on our strong regulatory frameworks and programs to protect the environment and human health from waste pollutions, illegal dumping, and hazardous waste. As mentioned earlier, the funding for the strategy only commenced from July this year. However, we have started making some inroads for some of the key actions. Our key announceable has been the introduction of the Plastics Reduction and Circular Economy Act in November last year. The Act provides a legislative framework for us to ban problematic plastics items, set design standards, and to mandate product stewardship requirements to make sure producers can manage the impact of their products across the life cycle. Starting from June this year, the Act will ban lightweight plastic shopping bags, and from November, the other items in this list. This Act is expected to stop 2.7 billion items from ending up in our environment and waterways over the next 20 years. We have also commenced work with councils to overcome barriers to the circular economy. The EPA, for example, is currently reviewing feedback from local government on an option paper for a new service to facilitate local government jointly procuring waste services. In terms of organics, a large support program is being developed to support councils delivering new and effective organics collections based on previous grants and also developing common educational messaging. We have also commenced discussion with a range of government agencies to leverage on government purchasing power to stimulate a local market for recycled material. And we also want to promote circular design principles in how we construct new buildings, precincts, and infrastructure. The New South Wales government is committed to measure and track how we are going with our targets under the strategy In particular, we've committed to develop a new measure of the emission performance of our waste and material in New South Wales. Our next speaker, Rusty Langton from ISF, will be presenting a review of global case studies that have done similar benchmarking, which is an initiative out from the New South Wales Circular Government Task Force. In addition to the waste and sustainable material strategy, the New South Wales government recognises more need to be done to enable system-level transformation to achieve a circular economy. This is why we are proactively embedding circular economy opportunities across various government strategies and plans. For example, the Future Transport Strategy 2056 recognises the importance of using life cycle assessment in assessing the impacts of new and upgraded transport assets. The strategy also seeks to promote circular economy objectives in transport procurement activities. At the precinct level, we have the state's first special activation precinct in parks, which will be Australia's first United Nations Industrial Development Organization's eco-industrial park. The aim for the parks is to actually be the nation's leading circular economy precinct. From an investment perspective, the circular economy was identified as a growth area in the 20-year economic vision for regional New South Wales, which means that circular economic projects are eligible for funding under the New South Wales $140 million Regional Job Creation Fund. Round 2 of that fund has just closed last week. And within my division, we are also embedding circular economy opportunities across various programs and initiatives, as shown in these slides. For example, our $750 million Net Zero Industrial and Innovation Program will drive the development of emerging clean technologies and clean manufacturing precincts. This will create opportunities to position circular economy innovations as one of the pathways for clean manufacturing. Another example is our Sustainability Advantage programs, which supports medium and large organizations to accelerate the adoption of sustainable practices. And circular economy is one of the 4 key focus areas that they have been driving adoption with their partners. The team have been working throughout the supply chain for many years to encourage the uptake of circular economy principles from R&D to project realization. We are also working to encourage the uptake of low-emission building material in the building and construction industry. As recycled material generally have lower embodied energy than raw material, this program presents an opportunity to stimulate the uptake of recycled content in construction. We will also be promoting circular design principles for building infrastructure and precinct development so that we can actually design out waste in the first place at the very first of the development process. Finally, I would like to invite you to have a look at our waste and sustainable material strategy if you haven't done so. I also look forward to sharing more updates on all our other initiatives that we can drive circular economy with you in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. That was fantastic. And we'd like you to really pop your questions in the Q&A box. We've got a few there already, and we'll be able to come back to them at the end. It's fantastic bringing out those aspects of preventing waste at the source, which Linda brought up as well. And also, Emily mentioned that through their participation on the New South Wales Circular Task Force, they actually raised this question about how to measure the benefits of their circular economy policies, which is a perfect segue through to Rusty Langton from UTS, from the Institute of Sustainable Future, and something we're really proud of getting these researchers and industry parties and governments, etc., working together on this problematic. So we can't wait to hear from you, Rusty, on the results of that research.
Yeah, thanks Jody, and thanks Emily. I'll share my screen and just checking that you can see that, everyone.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, fantastic. I'll get started. So firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today to attend the presentation, and also for New South Wales Circular for inviting us to present our research. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I present from today, the Gadigal people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders both past and present. And thirdly, I'd like to acknowledge the team that contributed to this research. The review was performed as a collaboration between the Institute for Sustainable Futures, as you know, the University of Newcastle, the University of Sydney, the University of New South Wales, and Macquarie University. This research was initiated because policymakers in Australia and across the globe are recognising the value in encouraging a more circular and more sustainable economic system. However, the New South Wales Government Task Force indicated a lack of clarity on the methodologies, tools and data that could be used to both measure progress in New South Wales and compare the benefits and trade-offs associated with one circular economy initiative over another, particularly in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Clarity is important because it influences things like government procurement, government investment in research and development to encourage innovation or more sustainable practices. And it informs strategies relating to messaging and education around problematic consumption and waste practices. But ultimately, the aim is to reduce the environmental, social, and economic impacts of production, consumption, and waste. The research team used a combination of desktop research and stakeholder engagement to answer the research question. We gathered 15 case study examples where common methodologies were being applied by policymaking agencies, organisations, and researchers at the appropriate scale. And we collected information from these case studies on whether they considered a production or consumption perspective, the scale at which they were applied, the indicators used to measure progress, and the types of data used. And we sought feedback from government, industry, and academic stakeholders via a series of workshops and evaluated global case studies according to their requirements. So the first requirement was the ability to benchmark greenhouse gas emissions at the state and regional scales and monitor changes in greenhouse gas emissions as a result of circular economy policy interventions. The second requirement, the ability of methodologies to integrate data from a range of sources that may be applicable at different scales. And the third requirement, the approach should be internationally standardized to meet national and international obligations as well. So when collecting case studies to compare with the New South Wales context, we considered 3 levels of aggregation. Macro represents global and national figures. Micro scale is used here to refer to a focus on a particular material, product, process, or organisation where environmental product declarations, process-based life cycle assessment, or company purchase records can be useful if available. And MESO represents a focus on an industrial park, industrial sector, a region, city, or a state where experience suggests that estimates of material use and emissions tend to be more incomplete and therefore more uncertain. So I'll now take you through the findings of our research. Our research found that a significant number of case studies were using hybrid methods to model the effects of certain aspects of circular interventions, but that most cases were predominantly focused at the macro scale, with examples in Europe, the United States, and China. Fewer examples were found at the MESO scale, so really at that sort of regional scale, indicating that capability at this scale is still emerging. And our research highlighted that hybrid life cycle assessment methodologies meet the requirements identified during our stakeholder consultations because it has been applied by policymaking agencies across the globe. It's a common methodology with case study examples at the MESO and macro scales. It's named because of its ability to integrate both physical and financial data sources to create a more complete data set, and it's an internationally standardized method. Other trends emerging from our review included that case studies tended to heavily focus on waste and recycling, with less emphasis on higher order opportunities for product lifetime extension, such as redesign, repair and reuse. And literature indicated a lack of data relating to repair services, which no doubt is influencing a focus on waste and recycling. So 3 case studies we did find that considered the MESO scale were in the Netherlands, where we've got examples sort of developing at the MESO scale, and in South Australia and Flanders in Belgium. However, we noted that while these case studies show promise, considerable effort in terms of data collection, modelling development, and stakeholder coordination would need to be achieved to implement a solution like these in New South Wales. So I'll briefly go into two of the case studies in Flanders and South Australia. The Flanders Circular Economy Policy Research Centre, co-funded by the Public Waste Agency of Flanders and the Department of Economy, Science and Innovation, have developed an economy-wide material flow monitor. And the original analysis in 2020 was focused on territorial impacts. And in 2021, the monitor was extended to consider consumption impacts via integration of input-output tables. Data is collected annually by OVAM from waste treatment facilities, recyclers, and the manufacturing industry. And this data is supplemented with literature where data isn't available, and the gaps are then filled using mass balance estimates. Material flow monitor features both scale and circularity indicators, and the circularity indicator used is the circular material use rate, which is a measure of secondary materials flowing back into manufacturing and focuses on domestic circularity. The South Australian case study was performed by Life Cycles in 2017, and the modelling scenario features a range of assumptions based on changes in material efficiency, energy mix, and reduced consumption of new products in favour of repair services. So input-output tables from the Australian Industrial Ecology Virtual Laboratory, known as IE Lab, we hybridised by integrating process-based life cycle inventory data from AusLCI database. And circularity modelling scenarios were integrated via product lifetime extension, secondary material substitution, material efficiency improvements, and energy efficiency improvements. We considered this study as a good example of what could be achieved with a New South Wales focus using readily available Australian data sources. However, the higher order circular interventions like product lifetime extension, increased use of share services, and secondary material use are all assumed in a hypothetical projections. So if these interventions were modelled according to real world practices, detailed data would need to be collected on specific business practices, production processes, recycling and secondary material use rates, and changes in consumption of final goods and services. In terms of opportunities that we highlighted in our report, firstly, the IE Lab is a research tool that presents a significant opportunity for policymakers. Research expertise connected to this tool could be leveraged to provide a customised base table for monitoring a circular economy in New South Wales. Secondly, significant progress has been made in material flow accounting and process-based data collection for the construction and agricultural sectors in Australia. And a similar model for data gathering could be followed for food, transport, manufacturing and waste sectors. And thirdly, we identified Australian research performed by the CSIRO where sensors were used to measure methane emissions from those sources which are typically harder to quantify. However, barriers remain, highlighting opportunities for future research. Stakeholders indicated that there are currently a wide range of calculation approaches used to quantify greenhouse gas emissions, particularly at the organisational level. Therefore, a common data management framework is needed to ensure data accuracy and consistency when gathering data for any future modelling exercise. And in some cases, sectors consist of a combination of industry and household stakeholders. So for example, the transport sector. And so different approaches may be required for targeted data collection in these areas. Studies reported that sensor-based data collection, although more accurate, can be costly. So further research would be needed to determine the costs and benefits of this approach. And finally, there was a general tendency for current circular economy strategies to emphasize recycling interventions. And this has resulted in the development of modelling scenarios that are biased towards monitoring only one aspect of a circular transition. So more research to collect data and model higher order interventions is needed to reap the full range of environmental, social and economic benefits offered by the circular economy. And that's it. Thank you for attending to hear the results of the rapid review.
Thanks so much, Rusty. Can't wait to see the discussion on that later. That's a wonderful presentation for us as well, because I'm Circular Economy Manager at Life Cycles. So we did that South Australian report. So it was really good to see that pop up. And interesting that we're tipping over to John next, because last year we did some of those kind of scenarios building into a lot of modelling that we did on Australia's electronic products. And again, we really pushed, we agree that it's always about recycling, and these things is a huge focus because it's what we know, it's what the infrastructure's there about. But in that latest federal government report on the cycling of electronic products, we also looked at extending product lifetimes by 10%, and we're starting to really play around with how you can do that and what the implications are of that. So while it's still hypothetical, we're really trying to push that product life extension and those higher order elements. So this is my bag. We really love talking about this stuff. And I also want to mention that you know, that the metrics and measurement is so important, and I've had lots of debates with circular economy people lately about the use of carbon as a metric as well. And we really like to talk about it as being important as a kind of environmental proxy, as a proxy of the environmental value of those materials we try and cycle. So for some of the people that are less carbon interested on the line, it's really important to think about carbon as an environmental proxy. So next up, we've got John Gatsakis. Oh, and one more announcement is that you might have been told already, but those rapid reviews are going to be released at the end of this conference. So you'll be able to read the whole report at the end. So now to John from the Product Stewardship Centre of Excellence. It's going to talk to us about, at a federal level, what's going on across a whole range of products to get them lasting longer and managed across their entire life cycle. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Jody. Hello, everyone. And thanks kindly to New South Wales Circular, to Lisa and to Jody for the opportunity to come along and share with you where we're at with the Product Stewardship Centre of Excellence, but a snapshot of where product stewardship is at nationally. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country in the region I'm working from today, on the far southeast coast of South Australia in the Coorong, the Ngarrindjeri people, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'll just share my screen here. Can you all see that?
Yep, that's great, John. Thanks.
Right. What I want to do is give you a snapshot and around some key issues, defining product stewardship, its role, a snapshot about the centre, some trends and developments in stewardship, and a sample of activities, but also opportunities for those that are interested in product stewardship and the interface with circularity, how you can get involved with us at the centre. What is product stewardship? There are various definitions. What we're working with at the centre is really about acknowledging those that are involved in designing, manufacturing, selling products, distributing, that they have a responsibility to ensure that those products are managed in a way that eliminates or reduces their environmental and human health impacts across the life cycle and across the supply chain. And really heartening to hear today from various speakers some acknowledgement of the importance of life cycle thinking, the importance of design, the importance of prevention, really important as we move forward in this whole space. Why? And it won't be new to any of you, in terms of various impacts, be it polluted waterways, destruction of habitats, unsustainable use of natural resources, consumption of non-renewable materials and resources, and exposing people and communities to harmful substances, climate change, as has been noted already, and the cost burden on communities and governments in terms of managing the range of impacts and issues. Product stewardship really does aim to drive environmentally beneficial outcomes from the outset, and that's something that the centre is very keen to do in terms of moving away from simply end-of-life scenarios. And this is where good design and clean manufacturing is very important, including the use of components and materials that are easier to recover, to reuse, to refurbish, to repair, to remanufacture. We really do need to give life to some of those principles around circularity and the first responders of durability, reuse, repair. Clearly, for us at the centre, product stewardship needs to be underpinned by specific circularity principles and outcomes and alternative models of production and consumption. We do need to acknowledge and think how we can apply at scale where possible, sharing models, repairing, leasing, dematerialisation. Some of that is happening already. Is it enough? Is the balance right? Absolutely not. And clearly a strong and authentic product stewardship approach starts with good circular design and is integral to the cost of doing business responsibly and ethically. Again, not new to many of you, but in terms of a visual around the touch points of product stewardship, it is across the product lifecycle, across the supply chain. So it highlights the range of opportunities and interventions that are possible through different measures to either eliminate or reduce environmental and human health impacts. A quick snapshot around the centre. We've been going for about 12 months, a busy time establishing. It's a consortium of the Institute of Sustainable Futures at UTS, the Australian Industry Group with its national footprint, and various industry members, and Coccinelle Communications. So a great mix of people that we work with and organisations in terms of delivering against our vision and mission. And that is to accelerate the uptake of product stewardship in Australia through various activities, mentoring, education, activating and supporting stakeholders across various product classes. We want to see the wide-scale adoption of product and material stewardship principles into business models that reduce waste, avoid waste, and create positive outcomes. And this in part is a contribution to the targets and priorities and actions identified in the National Waste Policy Action Plan. We've got various programs. These are focused around training, around mentoring, a lot of work with different industries and associations and companies, networking, our inaugural Excellence Awards, and a major project around product stewardship state of play nationally. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. And as well as various other research and advisory activities where we're helping scheme developers and associations and companies. In terms of what's been happening in the last 12 months to 2 years, there's been a lot happening in terms of both national policy, state policies and programs, various activities, but we see a product stewardship priority list that is growing and targeting different product classes. We're seeing more investment in product stewardship specifically, with various projects being funded and supported through the Commonwealth. And that includes the seed funding for the Product Stewardship Centre of Excellence. And we're seeing really important work around procurement at a national level to go beyond the sort of easy speak of positive procurement and looking at how that can be implemented across agencies, portfolios and sectors. Again, a snapshot around regulated product stewardship in Australia. Many of these won't be new to you, around different materials, substances, products, be it ozone depleting substances, packaging, electrical and electronic waste, specifically televisions and computers, but also the various container deposit schemes around the country. Voluntary product stewardship in different categories. Those that are accredited by the Commonwealth, including Mobile Muster, Tired Stewardship Australia, bags used in agriculture, such as the Big Bag Recovery Program, the recently announced B-Cycle Program, collective schemes, Paint Back, Drum Muster, and lots of work at an individual business level. And these are but a snapshot. They're not meant to be exhaustive by any means. What is interesting is the range of schemes that are being supported and worked on at the moment to either expand existing schemes or target new products, new material streams, new waste streams, and there's a lot going on. It really is an amazing period in terms of what's happening, but again highlights that much more needs to be done, and we do need to build in circularity into these schemes so that they're not reduced to end-of-life collection and recycling alone. From a centre perspective, there's various materials that we're producing that may be of relevance to some of you: practice notes, white papers, an ongoing program of webinars, and a growing list of case studies. It's always important to see how others are doing it, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and what the learnings are. We've also established a product stewardship network, and this may be of interest to those of you that are working in the space, and it's a more casual, friendly group around sharing knowledge, information, and experiences. And the one I want to finish on is a major project with UTS, the Institute of Sustainable Futures, that we're doing around the effectiveness and benefits of product stewardship. A major output of this will be the creation of a product stewardship portal with data about schemes, individual company activities, and what's happening, and the benefits and the outcomes associated with these various initiatives around the country. The portal really will be foundational when complete and launched, and will be a really exhaustive source of data that can help both inform policymakers, but also companies and associations. Not related to that, but a separate project, and given what's been mentioned by various people today, is a really important RMIT-led project funded by the Commonwealth on enabling design for environmental good. Given a lot of the discussion and often rhetoric and lip service to design, this project's going to be really important in terms of its recommendations and what it puts forward and how the government works with that to really put design, innovation, product development front and centre in terms of contributing to a circular economy. So that is something to keep an eye out for, both the effectiveness and benefit study and the RMIT work commissioned by the Commonwealth on design. So there are lots of opportunities to get involved with us at the centre if this is of interest to you. You can contact us directly, sign up to our newsletter, join the network, or just give us a ring. We'd be eager to hear from you. And I'll finish it there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John. There's so much going on now. It's really heartening to see all that work that's happening and all those resources that are being developed. Last but not least, we've got Justin Bonsey, who is a really exciting person because he has been pushing different elements of the circular economy and contributing to this space for years. He's a co-funder of initiatives such as Responsible Cafes, Responsible Runners. He's a former Boomerang Alliance campaigner, so he's been living and breathing this stuff for many years, and he's now at Southern Sydney Regional Organisational Councils, SROC. I don't know how you pronounce it properly, Justin, and he's doing amazing work there on procurement. So thank you so much for sharing everything you're doing, Justin.
Great, thank you, Jody. I'm just going to share my screen here. And sorry if my voice is a little bit weird. I managed to get COVID over the weekend.
Oh, no.
So yeah, I think I've got a pretty solid fever at the moment. So if I sound weird, if I say something that's too progressive, just blame the COVID. All right.
We can see your screen, but it's in presenter mode.
Okay, sorry, 1 second. I had this, and now it doesn't want to work.
Blame on COVID.
Yeah, that's probably it. It was working just fine this morning. Okay, this should work fine. How's that?
Yes, perfect.
All
Well
right.
done.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to the previous speakers and to New South Wales Circular for the opportunity to join this great event. Before beginning, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the SSROC region, the Darug, Darawal, and Eora nations, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, as well as any Indigenous Australians joining us today. Today, I'd like to discuss some of the highest impact opportunities and challenges facing a more circular local government from a Metro Sydney perspective. Just a bit about us. The Southern Sydney Regional Organisation of Councils, or SSROC, is an incorporated association of 11 councils spanning Sydney's southern suburbs, eastern suburbs, CBD, and inner west, covering a third of Greater Sydney's population, or 1.8 million people. Our councils collectively manage about 20% of the waste in New South Wales. I'm going to start by bursting everyone's bubble. So a circular economy is a destination we may not fully ever arrive at. It's more like a bus with 100 hands on the wheel, puttering down a highway full of potholes. Sometimes the wrong hands are on the wheel and drive the bus off a cliff or drive it into a 10-year roundabout. It is, however, a poster child for celebrating incremental wins and not making an enemy of perfection. So local government has a range of tools in their utility belt that can improve circularity within their sphere of influence, including council operations, domestic waste, planning in the built environment, and some are involved in managing commercial waste. Councils are becoming increasingly involved in the supply chain, which broadens their sphere of influence. Here are some of the tools in their utility belt in the fight against evil. Progressive waste strategy, which builds in circular principles, is data-driven, has top-down support, and has been socialized in the community. strategic planning, particularly in the built environment, and planning for future waste and resource recovery programs. Sustainable and joint procurement with a view to stimulating end markets, aggregating demand, and creating a favorable investment environment for necessary infrastructure. Contracts, incentive-based KPIs, and innovation clauses, and building relationships with industry to encourage innovation towards mutually beneficial outcomes. Innovative services that reduce or capture problematic materials like soft plastics, textiles, and batteries, smart tech like RFID in bins, or automated data capture and analysis in trucks. Community recycling centers and drop-off events made accessible to residents to reduce problematic materials and bulky cleanups and curbside bins. Education accompanying rollout of major services like FOGO, and resource recovery and resilience programs like reuse and repair centers. Mitigating carbon by bringing in EV fleets and ensuring end-of-life tires, for example, go to Tire Stewardship Australia accredited tire recyclers, and yes, even recycled Batman and Robin uniforms. But these only go so far, as council's sphere of influence is only a small piece of the puzzle. That makes these critical foundations for more circular local government, which are largely outside of council's control, all the more important to keep the bus more or less on the bitumen. Limited competition in the Sydney waste and recycling industry drives up prices, stifles innovation, and concentrates risk in the hands of a few. Competition for recycling services in Sydney is already so limited that some councils are invoking Section 55 of the Local Government Act to skip the tender process altogether, undercutting any leverage councils have left and missing out on cost-effective opportunities, like one major SS Rock tender a number of years ago that saved our councils nearly $100 million just through competition among tenderers. A major material flows and infrastructure needs analysis recently conducted has identified an urgent need for organics processing and transfer stations, bulky waste facilities, reprocessing facilities, and energy from waste. With a high population density in SS Rock, think 65% of 1.8 million people living in MUDs, a planning and zoning analysis identified only 3 locations in a 680 square kilometer region that could host an organics transfer station, which are crucial for adopting FOGO given the tyranny of distances to organics processing facilities to the south and west. We still don't have viable onshore end market solutions for mixed waste, textiles, plastics, bulky waste, and e-waste. The New South Wales government has been actively working to match supply with demand, but we still have a long way to go. It should also be noted that a curbside compositional audit that we've been conducting over the last 20 years has identified that we can achieve a maximum 66% diversion even with 100% recovery of organics and recycling, highlighting the critical role of energy from waste as Sydney landfills will be full by 2036. Councils have good data on their own operations, but limited transparency beyond that on what happens to recycling after it's picked up, preventing extended responsibility, impeding informed decisions about procurements, and presenting a reputational risk that their waste will end up somewhere unintended. Aligning value chain data protocols across all levels of government and bringing it under a centrally managed platform would facilitate many beneficial efficiencies. However, perhaps the 2 biggest issues impeding circularity are necessary legislative and regulatory reforms and funding. In 2019, we conducted an extensive sector-wide consultation and engaged law firm Clayton Utz to develop recommendations for reforming identified legislative and regulatory barriers. Councils and industry very much see eye to eye on many of these issues, including waste levy hypothecation, the definition of waste, the resource recovery order and exemption regime, alternative funding and assistance, waste minimization, reuse and repair, producer stewardship, uniform recycling label and regulating recycling claims, and of course mandating the segregation of C&I waste. I'd like to acknowledge Claire Smith at Clayton Utz, not only because I'm borrowing some of her slides, but for her great work on a high impact report she wrote for SS Rock that we've shared with the EPA to inform what may be the biggest circular resource recovery framework review in the state's history. And talk about good timing. The issues paper for this review was just released this morning on the EPA's Have Your Say page. So I'll briefly touch on some of these now. Funding from the waste levy is the most significant source of funding for council resource recovery programs. The New South Wales waste levy has increased by 148% over the last 10 years, while Waste Less, Recycle More funding has decreased by 43% over the last 8 years. From next financial year, virtually all non-contestable funding previously available to levy-paying councils for resource recovery programs through the Better Waste and Recycling Fund has been cut, despite the waste levy bringing in over $800 million a year. Without more investment in the sector, we won't come close to our 80% diversion target. The definition of waste in the POEO Act makes no distinction between a waste and resource, subjecting recycled feedstock for downstream processes to onerous restrictions and risks. As echoed in this quote from IQ Renew, an end-of-waste framework like that in Queensland would encourage innovation to stimulate new onshore processing technology and markets for recycled materials. That we don't yet have this is why we need resource recovery order and exemption regime. This regime currently lacks transparency, certainty, flexibility, and appeal rights, which could be improved with producer certificates of compliance, statutory timeframes for decisions and appeal rights, simplified approval procedures for pilot projects, decision-making procedures for the EPA, periodic reviews, and a register of producers. An independent statutory authority like Green Industry South Australia to drive major changes and strategic engagement with government and business could prioritize resource recovery with a ring-fenced fund funded by the levy and track progress towards targets. A clean stream of recycled feedstock for downstream manufacturing is critical for any onshore circular process. The new campaign Remade in Australia depends on this. But high contamination rates and confusion about proper recycling persist among consumers. Mandating a uniform recycling label, like the Australasian Recycling Label, while establishing standards and mandating that claims of recyclability, biodegradability, and compostability are held to these standards, will improve source separation and reduce contamination, greenwashing, and confusion towards a cleaner feedstock. After corporate education, APCO, and regulation, the ACCC and public shaming are the last resorts for false claims. It is heartening to see that the ACCC's compliance and enforcement priorities for 22-23 include closely scrutinizing businesses making environmental and sustainability claims, including claims about consumer goods, manufacturing, the energy sector, and carbon neutrality. Let's hope this extends to packaging as well. Last but not least, what one Metro Council has described as the greatest threat to council waste services in 25 years, the Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal, or IPART, has recently proposed a voluntary 1.1% peg of the domestic waste management charge as part of its review to reduce variation in the DWM charges and ensure value for money across councils based on transparent, reasonable, and efficient costs. This comes at a time when councils are up against a greater funding crunch than ever, from reduced EPA funding from the waste levy, COVID-19, rising fuel and contract prices, a virtual monopoly on recycling services driving up prices, and annual natural disasters. On top of this are the ambitious targets of the new New South Wales Waste and Sustainable Materials Strategy 2041, requiring new major services like food and garden organics that we have modeled regionally would require the DWM charges to rise by about 14% on average just to meet an EPA mandate. As councils inevitably exceed the voluntary peg, not only would they be listed in a public report the next year, encouraging a public backlash, but pressure will then grow to make it a hard peg. Once you get a peg, it's very hard to get rid of. The alternative is benchmarking of waste service costs based on clear pricing principles and a rebalancing of the DWM charge with general rates as proposed in IPART's discussion paper in August of last year, which isn't perfect, but would happen over a transition period, would leave council revenue intact, and give councils the flexibility to adjust the DWM charge as necessary based on clear and transparent pricing principles without the same risk of a public backlash. This consultation, which ends on the 29th of April, is different from others. All submissions must not only condemn the PEG, but must overwhelmingly advocate for benchmarking and rebalancing as the only viable alternative to the PEG identified so far. We're now facilitating a coordinated response together with local government New South Wales by all New South Wales councils and industry to do just this. Drop me an email if you'd like to learn more. So I packed as much as I could in about 10 minutes. So in closing, we're in the midst of perhaps the greatest transition to a circular economy in Australian history. So there are naturally going to be barriers. But if we strategically and systematically address competition, infrastructure, end markets, value chain data, underline legislation and regulations, funding, and avoid the PEG, will better enable local government to do their part in this transition. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Justin. That was an amazing analysis of some of the economics. I'm glad you talked about the barriers and that there's a lot that we can overcome them, because that was getting a little bit depressing at one point. I was thinking, are we screwed? So thank you for picking it up slightly at the end. But it's really important, these analysis of the real market levers and drivers behind us that are meaning that we can or can't do things. I was wondering, John, did you have any comments on some of these things that Justin was talking about in terms of resources and elements that are being provided for these kind of activities? I'm thinking with your national view at the centre, do you think that there's enough in play to be able to make this happen, or you know, what's your kind of view on that?
Look, I think there's some solid activity and contributions and investment to date, but absolutely there is much more that's needed, and it's not just around dollars and investment. Some of it is around willpower and just the cultural tensions and federation and things to do between the central government, you know, the Commonwealth and states, etc., but also in terms of the peak LGAs across the country as well, working more closely. So I think a lot more can be done. I think we need to see more central government, whether it's at a state, territory level or at a national level, take an interest in circularity and stewardship and all of these issues. It can't just be driven effectively out of an environment agency in isolation of every other portfolio and agency. So I think that's really, really important. And it talks to the whole issue of complexity and the need for system-wide redesign. Otherwise, we're not only chasing ambulances, we're chasing ambulances at the bottom of the cliff if we just leave it to a particular sector. So I think Justin's right, but you know, we just need stronger policies. And just to use it as an opportunity, we need to look at procurement really, really seriously. Grants come and go. You buy a machine, you buy a facility, a process. You know, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. We need to see procurement really get some traction, both in the government and at all levels of government and the corporate world.
Emily or Justin, did you have any comments on procurement?
Yeah, sure. I'm just going to pipe in that one of the key initiatives under our strategy is to actually drive the local market for through government procurement, and we are currently actively sort of looking at how we embed that as a procurement policy at the central government perspective. Like, you know, it's one thing telling agencies that they need to prefer recycled products in the strategy, you know, environmental waste management strategy. Is the other thing of putting it into the actual sort of procurement policy at the highest level. So that's the some of the background work that we are currently doing to make sure that it is a requirement for consideration as part of the procurement process. But on top of that, we also need to look at how we establish a bit of visibility for the market as well on the demand from government projects for recycled material and content. So one of the key things that we are looking at setting up is how we can sort of publish a list of projects, upcoming projects in the pipeline that will actually procure recycled material, so that we actually give that visibility to the market for anticipating the demand in the pipeline, and also looking at, you know, establishing a register sort of similar to the Victoria type of register for suppliers with recycled content to supply to government. And as part of the initiatives, there's a funding that goes with it as well. So we have a 13 million circular innovation fund where we are looking to use that to actually trial some of the new materials with recycled content in garment projects, so that as part of the process, we can then look at how we develop standards and also looking at improving specifications so that these new innovations, new recycled products can be used in other projects, not just, as a one-off thing.
Great. So there's real developments around recycled products, and I imagine there's some traceability and standardisation issues around that. And just you can come back to recycled if you want to concentrate on that. But I'd like to challenge you guys as well. So how do we define and purchase circular products, and how does that link in with some of the greenwashing type? We've had a lot of comments online in the chat box about the kind of greenwashing and the lack of transparency around some products that are saying they're circular, but is it really circular? Is there interest in it, or is it a bit quirky? How could you see us eventually really looking at circular procurement that goes beyond recycled materials and drives higher value reuse type elements as well, and shifting from products to services, things like that? Anyone?
I just wanted to say something that's actually related to that we work closely with some of the suppliers. Like I'll just give you an example. We have a sustainable pavements contract where 16 metro councils have joined a massive procurement to procure asphalt with recycled crushed glass as a replacement for natural sand to drive local markets. And through that, we've created a market that didn't previously exist for the equivalent of about 80 million glass bottles per year. And now we're doing the same thing for Crumb Rubber. And if you look at all the issues, right? When we first started this, we didn't have the reprocessing infrastructure in the region that was sufficient to match all of that demand. But by aggregating demand across all of these councils, and of course we aligned with Transport for New South Wales, work closely with the EPA and DPI, we're sending a really strong signal across all levels of government to industry saying this is now happening. So by specifying these sorts of things in the procurement, we're saying to industry, this is what's happening now. Give them plenty of time to respond, because industry are very good at responding to these challenges. They're very good, but they need to have a favorable investment environment to do it. And long-term contracts are a great way for them to have that certainty. Otherwise, they're risking their investment. Now with Crumb Rubber, it's a little bit, it's easier in the sense that it has proven environmental benefits by extending road life by, could be 30 to 40%, which is phenomenal. But at the moment, as I understand, no roads in New South Wales use Crumb Rubber because we haven't had enough processing capacity. But now there's a new recycling facility, Tire Cycle, out in Western Sydney. So we don't have to bring in Crumb Rubber from WA anymore. We're working at Tire Stewardship Australia. They're funding a large demonstration trial with about 8 councils, but we're working with the contractors for that to really look at scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, to help to see where we can improve their processes, to really understand where the different ingredients for this for the asphalt is coming from, and through that we're really working through all the different elements that will be included in an LCA.
That's great. So recognizing that it's not a typical procurement project where you've got something sitting on a shelf that you can just put into place, but working with everyone in that value chain to iron out the technical and market bugs that you need. And that element about providing the right market signals is really strong as well, and we should all be aiming for that. John, you had your hand up first.
Look, I think people like Kendall and Paula Rogers have answered your question in part, but a couple of points I'd like to make. One is we need to be careful we don't reduce it to gadgets. It's not just about circular products. It's just as much about circular behaviours. And so this means, we really need to get serious in this country about the social and cultural dimension associated with delivering a circular economy. And that means understanding people and behaviours and communities and the diversity that exists there. So I think understanding behaviours is really important.
Oh, people are so much trickier than infrastructure, John.
Yeah, I know, but it's very easy to be seduced by a gadget or a product, thinking that we've solved how you use that product, when you use it, whether you own it, whether you share it, can have a really big impact on how lightly you touch the earth. So I think we just need to be mindful of that issue, that it's not just, it's a combination of all of these things, not just the physical, but the social and the cultural dimension as well.
Yeah, and it's also, building into how we actually start looking at designing things, or when we actually start developing stuff. So, as I mentioned, one of the key things that we want to do is to promote the use of circular design principles and practices, and, providing tools and guidance for designers to actually think about not using, as much material to start with. How do we actually enable things to be sample so that they can actually be regenerated for other use? And that sort of first principle approach is really important for circular economy. So it's not just about gadgets like what John was saying.
Definitely. Rusty, did you want to jump in?
I'll jump in. I think I'll just jump in on what Emily said. So really looking at sort of that from that consumer perspective, that premature end of life, and thinking about, what Lucy Sharman has said in previous presentations about designing for disassembly and making it possible for, consumers and everyone right throughout the life cycle to be able to take a product or, a building, whatever it may be, and be able to separate all the components and be able to replace parts of them rather than having to throw out a whole product because it essentially can't be repaired. So, but there's also barriers in terms of, I've worked in repair for most of my career, and I have very good knowledge about what to look for in a product, and what to look for in terms of durability and whether something can be disassembled, what screws to look for in something, and all sorts of different things. But then you've got, I'm the exception, and then you've got people that just don't know, don't have the time, don't have the money even to invest in, a product that's a better quality version of something. And so, it's about trying to understand that story of, what are the barriers essentially in terms of, the barriers to sharing and repairing and reuse. And, as Tommy mentioned earlier, it's really like this is a big area and something that we can look to have a huge impact on mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm really excited about exploring that area further.
Great. Rocio Rutter has put a comment in on the chat box around the innovation risk / premium can be addressed by aggregating demand, which sort of links in, I think, to what you were talking about, Justin. But I wanted to sort of turn it around a bit. And I know that the conference tomorrow is going to be looking at this notion of risk in the finance community. Are you guys starting to reframe this risk question around the risk of not going circular, the risk of being just linear and having linear projects, and the way materials are going to change in the future? Any comments on that?
We're finding some of the inquiries to the centre from companies, some of them national brands, national companies, and they're really flipping it around in terms of product stewardship, circularity. It's not just around compliance and government imposition. It really is around opportunity, new products, product services, the range of things. So I think, that acknowledgement of risk as a real opportunity to differentiate in the marketplace in an ethical way is something we're hearing about from the inquiries to the centre anyway.
Justin?
Yeah, that's a really good point, John. I wanted to add that we're actually wearing the risk right now. So continuing business as usual right now, when you look at Sydney landfills, non-putrescible landfills will be full by, 2028? Putrescible by 2036. That's just around the corner. If we're going to look to energy from waste, for example, after all resource recovery attempts are made at all of the different materials that we can capture, that's still going to take 5 to 10 years, if we're lucky, to get to get something happening and up and actually working. And I know the EPA is working really hard on that, which is great. But I think we need to acknowledge that we're wearing the risk for business as usual right now. And if we continue this, we're only going to continue to get the same outcomes that we're currently having. We're so far away from our 80% diversion target right now. We're so far away that we have to start thinking totally differently, and also I think embrace some of that risk. I think permaculture has a really good approach to this, that where, you know, maybe we fail this time, but maybe we just next time we fail a little bit better, and we continue to fail a little bit better until we actually get it. Thus the, you know, celebrating the incremental wins.
Absolutely. There's two more questions I'd like to be able to ask before we skip to the break. Firstly, Emily, you've got a really pragmatic question up on the Q&A from Susan McHattie around how the waste levy is being invested in New South Wales, and how will you be partnering with local government?
Well, as Justin sort of pointed out, the waste levy revenue, about 1/3 of the waste levy revenue is used for the environmental programs, and that's part of what is being used to fund the $356 million strategy that I mentioned before. And within that strategy, we actually look at providing funding to drive some of the key reforms that we need to achieve the various targets under the strategy. For example, we are setting aside $65 million to actually enable the collections for the food and organic waste as part of our commitment for net zero emissions from organic waste. So, and there's also, $16 million that we have sort of set aside to actually enable to facilitate joint procurement of waste services for local council as well. And that's, talking to the idea of how we actually gather the sort of the purchasing power to actually have better waste services procured, rather than each of the different councils are left to their own to actually do this work. I also just want to add that as part of the strategy, we will continue to review the waste levy as well. I think what has been put in the strategy is to actually have a 5-yearly review on the operations of the levy, so that it will continue to achieve the policy objectives. And the other point to make is that the primary purpose of the waste levy is actually our economic lever to divert material from landfill. So it's trying to use that as a way to actually make recycling more cost effective, and at the same time sort of fund some of these initiatives. So it's a very tricky sort of balancing between the levies and what we use them for, but at the same time, we recognize that there are a lot of challenges and pressures across government and local governments to actually deliver some of these big targets ahead. So we'll continue to actually work closely with the local governments as well to make sure that we can actually support them as part of this journey.
Great. Final question I'd like each of you to respond to, and then we'll close up, but please do continue kind of trying to close out things on the chat as well. I think that's really useful. There's been talk today about the importance of collaborating, the importance of working across sort of traditional relationships to really instigate change towards a circular economy. I'd like to ask how you find working with organisations like New South Wales Circular that provide this kind of external place for people to exchange and work together on topics. What's your what have you found most useful with that, and what would you like to see continue or expand in that role? Anyone up first?
I might just jump in real quick. I mean, firstly, I think New South Wales Circular does a great job at bringing together stakeholders from all over the place, because really we do need to collaborate. One thing that you might focus on is we've done a lot of work on individual materials like textiles, plastics, these sorts of things. And sometimes when end market solutions aren't clear, we'll do an expression of interest. We'll put it out to the market, and we'll actually spend time looking at the different social enterprises from small to large, because some smaller ones are there, but we're just not aware of it. Maybe they don't have the capacity or the funding to scale up yet. All they need is councils or the state government to come in and help them expand. So I think those sorts of things help us to identify some end market solutions based on individual materials would be really useful.
And John, you can comment on your centre as well that's doing amazing work bringing together people across platforms.
Sure. Look, and it's really rewarding work, but it's not always easy. There's lots of very spicy conversations when you're trying to collaborate. Collaboration comes easily to some and not to others. But I think there's a whole lot of organisations, New South Wales Circular, the Planet Arc Hub, the Centre, various groups, you know, their role in brokering, our roles in brokering, connecting, and all of it is really important. The one thing I'd say from where we sit dealing with companies and associations is that they sell products and services into a national market. And so I totally respect and acknowledge state-based initiatives. But if we're talking to business that operate on a national basis, then that has a particular tone when you're looking at collaboration and how to make it work, you know, across states and territories and the various laws and regs and policies and standards. So I think the more brokering and connecting in a constructive and respectful way, the better. So that's at least from where we sit in terms of the sort of stakeholders and companies that we deal with.
Absolutely. Rusty, how have you found being part of the collaborative research element?
Yeah, it's been really great. I think it's great to bring people together that are often working in silos and, you know, like just like really sort of great experts in their area and might be aware of things that are going on sort of around them through word of mouth or through other research projects that they're involved in. But, you know, it's good to come together and have opportunities like this to discuss, find, you know, similarities in areas of interest. And, you know, I think in the future, you know, something that could be worked on in terms of what I'm particularly interested in, you know, that sort of data collection story and I think just getting, you know, a good big picture about, you know, what's actually happening sort of behind the scenes and, you know, what information could help us in, you know, trying to build a New South Wales sort of scenario, seeing what work has already been done and just really emphasising and sharing that information.
Any final words, Emily?
Yeah, no, I agree with all the suggestions from the other speakers. And I think, you know, one of the, as we have sort of spoken a lot in this discussion, it's not just about the waste and the recycling sector. It's actually looking at the whole of supply chain innovations and what we can do across, you know, even with consumer behavior change as well. So I think the key sort of opportunities here is to actually look at what are the sectors that we need to engage to actually help to improve connectivity and also develop innovations that actually help to complete the loop for the circular economy. So, you know, where there's new products looking for the symbiosis across different sort of industry, how we can actually connect them together so that we can close the loop for certain materials or products or certain sort of manufacturing sort of processes. That's the sort of stuff that, you know, state government, we can only do as much, but, you know, if we actually do have other sort of branches out there in the industry that can help to actually bring the different sectors together, that would be awesome.
Great. Lisa, are you ready to boom us into our lunch break?
I am, Jody. Thank you so much. And to panelists, what a fantastic discussion, some terrific insights on the urgency for circular economy procurement targets, for example, the social and cultural behaviours that need to be changed, examples of action from local government on how to procure recycled glass and rubber, but also New South Wales Circular's task force research into measuring carbon reductions in circular economy. So again, more evidence for those of you watching today for pathways to act and implement circular economy. All the research you've heard today will be on our website, and I encourage you to access this research and come back to us if you have any questions or want to get involved in the work of our task forces. We are going to take a lunch break now. Please enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you back here at 1:30. We have a must-see panel that Jody's also going to host for us with Victoria, South Australia, ACT, New South Wales Government, of course, and the Product Stewardship Centre of Excellence. So see you after the break.